ESPN is driven by Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. It's time for the First Community Credit Union Blues postgame show.
Presented by Scott Lee Heating Company and Urban Chestnut Brewing Company on 101 ESPN.
Dropped at center ice. The final 4.5 seconds tick off. And the Blues open up the post-Olympic schedule with a 1-1 record. The road gauntlet begins for St. Louis.
And you don't see this Blues team until a week from Tuesday, I believe is what it is. They'll play on the road for 4 straight. That starts tomorrow night against the Minnesota Wild, and then they will travel to Seattle, travel to San Jose, which will be the day of the NHL trade deadline on the 6th. And then they'll play against the Anaheim Ducks. By the way, they'll play the San Jose Sharks that night, the night of the trade deadline. And then they'll play against the Anaheim Ducks on Sunday before returning home for a game, go back on the road, come back for a game, and then go on the road for 3 straight. 8 of their next 10 games are on the road, including 2 back-to-backs, including 4 games in 6 days. Twice. So they have a ton of hockey that is about to fall on them, and the Blues are going to have to find a little bit more consistency once they hit that stretch. Welcome everyone in to our extended postgame coverage, the 4th period on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you as the Blues do fall to the New Jersey Devils today 3-1. And what started off is a hell of a hockey game. I mean, that first period was back and forth. You saw speed. You saw scoring chances. You saw some big saves by both Jordan Binnington and Jacob Markstrom. It's just the consistency we've talked all season about went from the first period to the second period. And I don't think it's the Blues just lost the will to push. I really think that was the New Jersey Devils that made an adjustment, and the Blues just were not able to adjust to New Jersey's adjustment. I think Curbs and Joey mentioned it on the broadcast. You know, Blues were playing that transition hockey that they played against Seattle on Thursday night. Through the neutral zone, cross of the blue line, defensemen getting involved, and they were getting their scoring chances. Second period, New Jersey started to force the Blues to put the puck over them, behind them. 1, Jacob Markstrom was very aggressive coming out of the net, making plays up the ice. 2, Blues just were never really able to get to that dump and chase game that allowed their defensemen to get into the rush. And once New Jersey made that adjustment, the Blues just were really never able to find that offensive groove back the rest of the way. Special teams didn't help them, and then, of course, it actually hurt them in the second period. And then in the third period, they made a little push when they pulled the goalie, but overall fall short tonight. So let's do this. I'll give you more of my thoughts coming up in a bit with our Ted Drew's 3 takeaways. We'll hear from Jim Montgomery on the other side. We'll also get to some of your comments as well on our YouTube chat at 101 ESPN STL. You can also join us over on our text line 314-399-9646. But before we do any of that, let's hear from Curbs and Joey and get their final thoughts and reaction following the Blues 3-1 loss to the Devils.
The soundbite of the night is presented by Rocket Convenience Stores. Fuel your car and your daily cravings at Rocket Convenience Stores.
All right, Alex, thank you very much. Joe, we look back at this game here today, and, man, a really good first period. But some things this season have been consistent, and unfortunately the consistencies haven't been real positive. Tough second period reared its head again.
Yeah, it did. Like you mentioned, Curbs, I thought a high-energy, up-tempo first period. You know, chances both ways, saves both ways. There was physicality. You thought St. Louis was going to pick up right where they left off a couple nights ago when they beat the Kraken here on home ice. And then that second period showed up, and all of a sudden you just felt the tide slowly start to turn. And I tell you what, it really started to slowly turn in the Devils' favor because the transition game for St. Louis just slowly kind of evaporated from this game. New Jersey made some great adjustments. You got to give it to the defensemen. They stand up really tall at the blue line. They had lots of forwards coming back in support. And then what's interesting about St. Louis's game, once that transition game started to kind of fizzle away, they couldn't really find that next layer. This is what good teams do. You know, all of a sudden, transition shut down. Let's get down to the forecheck. Or maybe it's a heavy forechecking team, and that starts to get shut down. Well, we'll switch to the transition. Maybe it'll be the special teams. Good teams find different ways to win games. And right now, coming out of the Olympic break, This is a St. Louis team that has really been thriving off the transition. It's a shame that it did get shut down there in that second period. The Blues got caught out there in some long changes, and they really couldn't find that next gear all the way up into the very end.
Yeah, a lot of hype of this one with Jack Hughes coming in with Jordan Bennington as well. And frankly, neither one of them disappointed.
No, they definitely didn't. I mean, listen, this game could have gotten way out of hand earlier. So many tips. Again, being down there at ice level, shots from the Devils defensemen, they were getting through. They were getting tipped. Quick reaction saves from Jordan. The way he was seeing the puck, I was very impressed by how sharp he was fresh off his trip to Italy. And then on the flip side, Jack Hughes, next to Timo Meier, I think he was the best player on the ice. You know, it's a really fun adventure when you watch Jack Hughes because he really controls the pace of the game. He dictates whether this thing is going to move fast or it's going to move slow. You know, seeing him come to the neutral zone with speed, it is really a thing of beauty because he hardly even takes a stride. The way he just bends those edges in and out reminds you a lot of the old Nick Leddy days, the former Blue defenseman who've always admired the way he skates. But when he's got that puck, all eyes are on him, and it was certainly an impressive night for him. A night that started in warm-ups, of course, plenty of USA posters, lots of American flags here, a ton of Americans obviously in the building here in St. Louis. So it was really fun to see Jack Hughes so quickly after the Olympic run. And as the game was wrapping up, he stopped for about 5 to 6 minutes right behind their bench, talked to a bunch of fans, which I think is so awesome. I think he's really taking ownership of what this responsibility is. You score a goal like that, whether you like it or not, you're going to be put in front of a lot of things, and I just think he's done a terrific job of it.
Robert Thomas wasn't available tonight. Jim Montgomery saying yesterday, too, that, you know, they would have liked him to get a couple more practices. So we'll see if he's available in Minnesota tomorrow when the Blues head there. That said, Colton Parayko, back spasms, a late scratch. He is not going to play in Minnesota, so he'll miss these 2 games. But with that, we did see something, and that is they decided to put an A on Jake Neighbors.
Yeah, how cool was that? You know, it caught my eye there in that first period. And listen, Jake's worn a letter in the preseason a few times, but I've never seen him with one during the regular season. And right when I saw it, I reached over to Richie Matthews, of course, who was one of the trainers here for St. Louis, been around the league a long time, and certainly he's got his pulse on things because he's the one that sews the letters on. And I just said, hey, has he ever worn one? And he said, no, this is the first time. So it's a great thing for Jake. Certainly something that has been in the making for a long time because he may be a young player. He certainly is a leader. You know, the way he just grabs guys, brings them into the fight, whether it be his play or the way he is so vocal on the bench, one of the loudest guys down by the bench, the way he conducts his business. You know, he surrounded himself with good leaders in O'Reilly and Braden Shen when he broke into the league, and he's learned the right way. And he's a young kid, like I said, at heart, but he's just got so much wisdom of an older man, a guy that's been in the league for 20 years. So it was great to see the leadership role for Jake. Continue to love to watch the way he plays. And if you're a player on this team and you're a coach, you just got to admire everything about his game because he really does bring everyone into the fight because he does one thing that a lot of players just shy away from, and that is just doing all the things that some players just do not want to do, whether it be take a hit, give a hit, get to the front of the net, do all the dirty things that leaders do with, of course, not thinking about themselves, but thinking about the guys around them.
Well, for the Blues now, the first 2 games after the break were on home ice. They're about to live out of the suitcase for the month of March.
Yes, they are. A quick little jaunt here to Minnesota tonight and a quick 4 o'clock game in Minnesota. We're going to come back for about a little over 24 hours before we really hit it hard. And like you mentioned, Curbs, it's heavy travel here through the month of March and into the first week of April, actually. And it's not just travel. We're not talking central Winnipegs and Minnesotas and Chicagos and Nashville. We're talking West Coast travel. You know, 2 Western California swings. We got a Western Canadian swing still coming up here in a couple weeks as well. So it's heavy travel. It's long days, long travel, and it's time zone changes, which has quite an effect, especially on players this time of the year. We're not going to see a lot of practices. We're going to see just guys playing games and some morning skates just to stay sharp. But really, it's all business at this point moving forward with the travel. We're going to be seeing a lot of hockey.
All right, Joe, let's get it back to you, Alex. The Blues fall to the Devils here, back in Minnesota tomorrow.
It's time for tonight's 3 takeaways, presented by Ted Drew's Frozen Custard, a St. Louis tradition for over 95 years. Unmatched quality, unforgettable taste.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, and gives us a chance to just jump right into it with my takeaways to kind of add on to most of that stuff. You know, the initial takeaway is just, I don't know if it's frustrating anymore for Blues fans in terms of those wins and losses. I think a lot of Blues fans have kind of come to terms with where the team is at. This was one of those games that you looked around and you saw the opportunities that they were generating, and you say, yeah, it's about right. I think the adjustments is the biggest factor into this game, at least for me today. When you saw what New Jersey was able to do, it's the one thing that I think Jim Montgomery was talking a lot about going into this resumption of play. The reloading, the ability to go out there and win back the puck when you lose it, the ability to adapt to game situations, and more of that plays into the road than on the home ice, because you get that last change. On the road you don't have that last change, so you're trying to adapt game management. This was one of those two that, as much as I loved the first period, you just couldn't get back to that in the second and third period. But this isn't one of those games that you looked at as a loss like earlier in the season where they lose and you're thinking it's like, geez, they weren't trying out there, or, geez, they didn't have that fight at all through the hockey game. Man, I think this was just a simple answer of the New Jersey Devils found an attack to the Blues attack, and the Blues were never able to adjust and figure out how to attack them again. And some of that was just really good defensive play by the New Jersey Devils, and some of that was the Blues learning how to be able to accomplish that, being down a couple of guys that provide a lot, like Colton Parayko, who can rush up the neutral zone and create offense with his speed and his big size. Without Robert Thomas, like they have been without for a lot, but they also lost that line chemistry. That Holloway line was so good the other night against Seattle, and in this game, they didn't have it. Jim Montgomery had to break up a couple of line combinations. He broke up that Dvorsky line. He broke up that Bergeron line. You saw some individual performances. Snuggerud with 5 shot attempts. Holloway with 7 shot attempts. So you saw guys get their chances. It's just there's got to be more push to get to the inside, and that's what New Jersey did a really good job of today, keeping things to the outside. Second takeaway for me, it's a really tough go for Jordan Binnington as of late, and I don't think anybody would deny that. Just kind of where things have stood for Binnington. He's now 1-8 in his last 9 games, going back to the turn of the calendar year, January 1st. But listen to this, and this is just my tinfoil theory on the struggles for Jordan Binnington. You have not seen the same goal production in front of the goalie that you have seen with Joel Hofer. And here's what I mean by that. In the last 9 games that Jordan Binnington has played, he's 1-8. That one victory came from a 2-0 shutout win over Montreal. The Blues have scored a total of 20 goals in those 9 games. If you're doing quick math, you're averaging about 2.1 goals per game in those 9 games for Jordan Binnington. In the last 9 starts for Joel Hofer, the Blues are 5-3-1, and they have scored 31 goals for him. So you're talking a little over 3 goals, about 3.5 goals per game. No, I'm sorry, what is that? 4 goals? 4 goals per game? Over that? Terrible math by me. That's not 4 goals. I'm doing math in my head, which is a dangerous thing. We're talking about like 3.5 goals per game versus 2 goals per game. Again, it's not much. And there's been games that Jordan Binnington has given up 4 or 5 goals in net, and the Blues have had to score 6. But if you're looking through them, at least on paper, there just hasn't been that same offensive support. And, Joel Hofer's found ways to come up with wins with low scoring amounts. But, man, in his last 9 starts where he's been 5-3-1, the Blues have put on a performance. We talked about it in pregame with Joe, of them averaging about 4.1 goals per game in their last 7 outings. And a lot of those have had Joel Hofer in between the pipes. And now the Blues just have not had that goal support. And Jordan Binnington, I thought, had a really strong performance tonight in net. That's my third takeaway, and I'll probably touch more on this in the final look. But broad stroke, we'll get into it in the final look, but I'll hone in on Jordan Binnington. I don't know what's going to take place between now and Friday on the NHL trade deadline. As a Binnington fan, I'm very hopeful that he is still a part of this team. But with the uncertainty of the trade deadline and where this team is at, and honestly how he showcased himself tonight, just like he did in that Olympic performance, it wouldn't surprise me if teams come calling Doug Armstrong and Alex Steen about Jordan Binnington before the trade deadline. if that's the last time we see Binnington, and my assumption is you'd get to see him maybe on Wednesday when they play the Kraken, but my guess is that might be Joel Hofer because Hofer just played them, had success against them, and Hofer, of course, is going to play against the Minnesota Wild tomorrow night. If that's the last time we see Jordan Binnington in a Blues uniform, specifically on home ice, what a career he has had. And again, I'm not trying to act as if it's, super Debbie Downer because he could be back here the next time they're on home ice. But I'm just looking at it from that perspective. If that's the last time we see Jordan Binnington, we're talking about hero in St. Louis for what he has done for the Blues in terms of the performance on the ice, what he has done off the ice, and, of course, in those playoff performances. So it would not surprise me if teams get aggressive for Jordan Binnington. You're going to deal with a ton of rumors between now and the end of the regular season. Not just because of the trade deadline, but also what happens in the offseason. But for Jordan Binnington, it was a heck of a performance, and I'm glad that he performed the way he did. Yes, it was a loss. Still stopped 30 of 32 shots tonight against the New Jersey Devils. Kept this a 2-goal hockey game all the way up until the Blues got that that pulled goalie goal to make it a 1-goal game. But for Jordan Binnington, that's a really good way to come back to the St. Louis Blues after how the first half has treated him, and then, of course, how he performed in that Olympic tournament. So my Ted Drew's 3 takeaways. As always, we want to hear yours. You can send them over via our text line, 314-399-9646. Also our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. We'll take a break, come back here from Jim Montgomery, and I'll give my final look on just a broader stroke on this being the last game before, or the last home game, I should say, before that NHL trade deadline. So we'll get to all that next. Alex Ferrario with you. This is St. Louis Blues Hockey. Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends out at First Community Credit Union. Hey, getting your family's finances in order isn't just for the grown-ups. It's also about teaching your kids good money habits early on. First Community is offering the Rising Stars program. This is designed to help kids 12 and under learn to save, earn, and grow with exciting incentives made just for them, like receiving $1 for every A that they get on their report card. And from opening their first account to watching their savings grow, your kids will be building smart money habits for life. Plus, as a parent, and I can speak to this with 3 little ones at home, you can manage your whole family's finances all in one place while saving more with very competitive rates on checking and savings account. You can visit one of the 40-plus locations in Missouri and Illinois, the First Community branch locations, to learn more about the Rising Stars program and start establishing your family's financial foundation today. Must qualify for membership. $1 share deposit is required. First Community Credit Union for all your savings and all of your loans.
Welcome back to the First Community Credit Union Blues postgame show.
Presented by Scott Lee Heating Company and Urban Chestnut Brewing Company on 101 ESPN.
Final time here on our St. Louis Blues extended postgame coverage, the fourth period. You're on your home for the Blues 101 ESPN. Again, we're live up on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL, so you can join us over there and join the conversation. Throw some questions our way if you have any for us. We'll get to those in a bit. But first, let's hear from the head coach, Jim Montgomery, get his thoughts on this team's 3-1 loss to the Devils tonight.
It's time to hear from the head coach, Jim Montgomery, presented by Fisher Window and Door Store, offering quality American-made Marvin windows and doors. Visit their showrooms in Brentwood or East Alton, Illinois.
I thought we started the game fast. We started on time. The only thing that I thought was lacking was the last maybe 4 or 5 minutes. We started to tail off with our pace and our intensity. And then the second period, it would have been nice if we could have had the same second period as last game. That's the way we need to play. And unfortunately, we lost too many battles, so we don't have the puck. And then when we do have the puck, because you don't have it, you want to make a play. And we had, I think, something like 19 turnovers. So that leads to playing a lot in your own end. We couldn't get defensemen off the ice, and the second period just wasn't good enough for us, game management.
Offensively, you feel like you got inside enough?
I think the effort to get there was. I thought first period in particular, I can't say after that we weren't in the offensive zone very much So, again, for us, we got to create an identity where our competitive spirit is allowing us to have puck possession, and it's allowing us to attack their net. It's allowing us to get odd man rushes. And we weren't at the standard that we need to be at, and we need to get there.
So a penalty, to take there late in the second period leads to their power play goal. Makes it a little more challenging, going into the third down 2, maybe at 1-0. It's still a one-shot game.
Yeah, but, our power play had more opportunities and we didn't score, it's a game of special teams. It's one of those things we want to win. We didn't win them tonight, so had a big effect in the outcome.
Could you have seen more? Did you maybe not get enough of a push to start in the third period? It seemed like maybe later on it started coming a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I agree. You would have liked to see more desperation, absolutely. More chaos at their net.
Without Parayko, I think maybe you got some extra responsibility. How do you think he handles the added minutes?
Well, he was very noticeable. Our last 2 practices before Thursday night's game were his 2 best practices of the year. And I thought Thursday night was really good, and I thought he built on that tonight. Now, you see with the extra added ice time, he starts to handle the puck. He starts to make more plays, like you saw him deke a goal, defenseman to his backhand, try and take it to the post. Those are the things that we're excited about.
Part of Binnington was good enough and kept you in that game, made enough saves for you.
Binnington was excellent. I'm sitting there halfway through the second, and I'm just like, why do we not play our best games when he's in it? It seems like he's gotten the worst efforts of us all night, and he battles, he keeps making saves, he does everything he can to keep it 2-0. There's nothing he could do on any of the goals.
Part of its availability with Parayko or guys in the box, but giving Mayu more time on the PK too, is there growth you've seen in his defensive game that allows you to trust him in those situations?
I think it all comes down to confidence. We're seeing growth in the offensive side. We're seeing growth on the defensive side. He's killing more plays. The penalty kill is something in practice that he's been working on, and it's gotten to the point where we were going to start using him regardless of who's, healthy.
When it's giving Jake the 8 tonight?
Well, Jake Neighbors is a team-first guy. He's got an incredible positive attitude and infectious, and he loves to play the game the right way, so it was kind of simple giving him the A. He's got a lot of leadership skills in him.
Does he vocal, or is it just more lead by example?
No, he's vocal. Like, he's not afraid to, talk at the right times on the bench and timeouts or I don't know about the locker room, but, you do on the road more than at home. You hear the voices that are consistent, and he's one of them.
Man, Joey, I thought, said it perfectly when he was talking about it in the broadcast of him getting the letter and them giving it to him for the first time other than in preseason action. And, man, a couple of the times Joey referenced it on the broadcast. Jake Neighbors is barking to the whole bench when somebody does something good. Keep it up. Make them pay, boys. That is the vocal presence that Jake Neighbor is, and it does not surprise me one bit that they gave him the letter A, and I think that's why there's so much talk about, if they move on from Braden Shen at this year's trade deadline, that Jake Neighbors might be the clear-cut captain moving forward. But regardless of what happens there, you love to see that because they're recognizing a guy that is a leader, as Jim Montgomery just referenced, but think of it this way, too. That's the next wave of core that they're talking about, right? And if you can find the voice of the next wave of the core, you're already steps ahead of what you need to be when you start trying to get competitive with that core group of players. I also want to mention Logan Mailloux before we hit the final look, because that is back-to-back games. And I thought Jim Montgomery had a great quote yesterday talking about Mailloux, saying, look, he's figured out the first layer of being an NHL defenseman, and now you have to keep adding on to that layer. And tonight he had 5 shot attempts. He was a plus on the ice, played penalty kill minutes, or over 20 minutes of ice time because of the absence of Colton Parayko. More responsibility means more trust means more comfortability on the ice. And Logan Mailloux's best asset has always been, from when he was a prospect that was drafted in the first round to playing in the American Hockey League to getting games with Montreal last season. I remember we talked to a Montreal Canadiens beat writer when the Blues traded for Mailloux in the offseason. And they said his defenses still need to be worked on, but his offensive game is there. When you get comfortability as a defenseman, you start playing more offense. He took a one-time shot in that second period, I think, that nearly resulted in a goal, and that's on the hands of Jim Montgomery saying after Thursday's game, we'd like to see him use his one-timer more. If you get more comfortable as a defenseman and understand what you need to do to have success, now you could start playing with your best assets, and that's offense. And, boy, I hope we see that by the end of the season, because if Logan Mailloux can take that step for the Blues, that's another guy that you feel comfortable with. And, once again, another guy that bounces into that core that the Blues continue to talk about. With that being said, let's wrap up tonight's post-game festivities with our final look.
It's time to take a look back at tonight's game with the final look.
Driven by Pure Performance. Only stop for all your aftermarket vehicle needs.
You heard Jim Montgomery's presser. You heard Chris Kerber, Joe Vitale break it down. I don't think there's really much else to break down from this game. There's 23 more games to play before the end of the season, but I want to hone in on the final look before these final 3 games, and really 2, because they only play 2 before the deadline, and then they play the night of the NHL trade deadline. I mentioned this in my Ted Drew's 3 takeaways, specifically with Binnington, but widen that scope, because we don't know what this roster is going to look like the next time we see the Blues on the ice here at Enterprise Center. We don't know how many guys get moved, if any guys get moved out, but what we do know is there is going to be tons of rumors and speculation and reports of guys being available and teams being interested in certain players between now and Friday afternoon. And speaking specifically of a handful of these guys that have been so monumental in the Blues' stretch of winning, and I know they haven't done a lot of that recently, but Braden Shen, Jordan Binnington, Justin Falk, those 3 specifically, because I don't know, some of these other guys have no trade clauses. I'm not going to speak to what happens with Jordan Kyrou or Robert Thomas. Those guys have no trade clauses. They decide if they're going to get moved. Binnington, Shen, Falk don't have that same luxury at this point of their career. And, Jordan Binnington provided Blues fans something that they have never seen, a Stanley Cup, and that's a goaltender making monumental saves in between the pipes. He has gone through a whole lot of big head talk of Is he a number one go-to guy? Is he not a number one go-to guy? Regular season goalie versus postseason goalie. All I can speak of, and all Blues fans that are listening to this can speak of, is that guy always showed up when the team needed it. In the biggest moment, in the biggest game, he always came up with the biggest save. And I can speak to the Stanley Cup championship. I can speak to the Blues pursuing a Stanley Cup before the season got shut down the next season. You can speak to regular season performances late in stretches like they did that year that they made the playoffs. What was that, in the 21-22 season, where the goaltending wasn't the greatest, but the offense was so good that the goaltending did just enough, and he nearly beat the Colorado Avalanche. He lost his job, got back in the net against Minnesota, beat the Wild, got knocked out due to an injury against the Colorado Avalanche. In my opinion, would have beaten the Avalanche if he stayed healthy. And then, of course, steam-headed that push last season to make the playoffs post-Four Nations. Braden Shen, a guy that has bled blue from the moment he was traded to St. Louis, and a guy that has epitomized what the Blues have always wanted to do and what Blues fans want to see, that work boot mentality where he's out there pushing it every single game, but on top of that, he's always there to defend his teammates, defend the guys on the ice, and he has done that from the start that the Blues acquired him all the way up until what may be his last game. And then, of course, Justin Falk, who dealt with a lot of slack when he was acquired because of Alex Pietrangelo. But if you go look at the numbers, he has put up some really good numbers as a defenseman and kept this Blues team competitive in those first 4 or 5 seasons that he was a member of the St. Louis Blues. Again, I'm not trying to be super somber and downer about this. I think it's just important to recognize that if this was the last game that Blues fans had the chance to see those 3 wear blue notes, how lucky we were to see those guys play for the St. Louis Blues. My hope, they're still a part of this team post-trade deadline, because I think if the Blues still want to turn this thing around for next season, they need guys like that on their roster. But, of course, NHL trade deadline and NHL front offices may have a different mindset and a different direction. So we'll see what unfolds between now and Friday afternoon. But for that, I still think it's important to look at what those guys have meant to St. Louis Blues history, if there's a chance we don't see them in a blue note again in person. That's going to close it down for us tonight. Again, the Blues will be back at it tomorrow against the Minnesota Wild, 4 o'clock puck drop, with a 3 o'clock First Community Credit Union pregame show here on the St. Louis Blues home, 101 ESPN. Again, a huge shout out to Jim Hewer, also Jordan Deacon helping us out back in our network studios. I'm Alex Ferrario. Hope everyone has a great rest of their evening, great rest of the weekend. We'll talk tomorrow to wrap up the weekend and start a new week, the final week going into the trade deadline. Blues and Wild right here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN.
Thanks for listening to the First Community Credit Union Blues postgame show.
Presented by Scott Lee Heating Company and Urban Chestnut Brewing Company on 101 ESPN.